Opening up AI with IBM and Meta, VLSI's payday got put on hold, RISC-V not so risky after all, Aviz gets supersonic funding, NetApp taps ONTAP for AWS, Broadcom issues a return to the office, and more on this episode of the Gestalt IT Rundown. Hi everyone, welcome to the Rundown for December the 6th. My name is Tom Hollingsworth, and I want to wish everyone out there a national happy put your own shoes on day. Hopefully one at a time, unless you're one of those really creative people, like my co-host, Mr. Stephen Foskett. Stephen, welcome to the show.
I think I put my shoes on the normal way. I'd love to be creative, and I'd love to have some solution to this problem, but shoes are just one of those things.
Yeah, they are. And we have to wear them if we work anywhere other than our home office. And then some of us even wear it in their home office. But we'll get to that story in just a little bit, because we want to kick off this episode with a story from our friends over at Vast Data, because they are claiming a big upgrade and have landed fresh funding rounds at the same time. This new version, 5.0, includes multi-protocol and unified namespaces in AWS for a claimed 80% cost advantage over EBS. The new software also has intelligent anomaly detection and log analytics. The company bagged a $118 million Series E round, boosting their valuation to over $9 billion. Vast just keeps getting bigger, Stephen.
Absolutely, and frankly, Vast is doing it. In fact, I'm not even sure why they needed that Series E round, except if it was a way to kind of open the door to some last-minute investors in order to prep the company to go public. That sometimes happens. Or maybe they're just waiting on the market to pick up a little bit so that they'll look even better. But frankly, the company looks great already. Everything I'm hearing says that they're making money. They're doing really well. They're selling. They've turned over some folks internally in order to basically move the company to the next level, especially on the sales side. And that's what happens with these companies as they mature. But happily, they're also maturing the software. As you mentioned, for AWS at reInvent, they were talking about basically competing with EBS, or EFS, sorry. And that's what the new platform can do. You've got now a cluster can span different AWS zones, I believe. I wasn't briefed on it, so I'm not 100% sure. You've also got some nice real-time intelligence in there in terms of audited logs and anomaly detection, as well as acceleration for their database offering, which is sort of a dark horse product for the company. I think most people think of Vast as basically a scale-out NAS, but it also has database and object storage components as well. Really, the company's doing great. It's great to see them finding a nice place in the cloud. It's great to see, of course, anybody saving customers money, and their report that they released here shows that a 300 terabyte EFS customer could reduce their cost from $90,000 a month to just $20,000 a month with Vast, which is a pretty nice offering. So I'd say overall, good news for Vast. Very excited to see what they do next. A bunch of good people with good software. A U.S. appeals court tossed out a ruling this week that would have seen chipmaker Intel liable for over $2 billion in damages regarding patents on Ivy Bridge and Skylake. These patents involve memory voltage and clock speed control. And while VLSI was formerly heavily involved in chip development in the 80s and the 90s, the current form of the company is more about patents. They acquired these through purchasing NXP by way of Freescale, and they've successfully litigated infringement cases against Intel in the last few years. But this appeals court held that there was infringement on one of the patents, but threw out the judgment on the second in order to hold a new trial. Is this good news for Intel?
I think it's good news for Intel right now, but I need everyone at home to understand that there are two things that can concurrently be true that feel like they are diametrically opposed. Intel can have infringed upon patents, and VLSI could be considered a patent troll. Now, I know you're probably sitting there scratching your head going, well, wait a minute, that doesn't make any sense to me. So let's take those kind of in a vacuum. Intel very well could have, either through hiring people or through whatever other method that this typically happens, used some kind of intellectual property that VLSI acquired through buying it from NXP and Freescale. So you have to understand that the market for these things anymore is not the technology. It's buying the patent to sue somebody who's using it so you can get a payday. That's a patent troll. But you can still infringe upon that patent. And you notice that they're usually suing you for technology that was created 5, 6, 7 years ago, because the odds are good the patent, if it hasn't already expired, is getting really close. So Intel was found to have infringed on one of these patents, and there was a judgment in the second one, but it was just like astronomically huge. Okay, so we got that. The second thing is that VLSI could very well be a patent troll, because when you look at what's been going on for the last, I don't know, 4 or 5 years, they only seem to make money by suing Intel. And they've made a lot of money. And the problem is that as soon as you make money off of one lawsuit, you're going to start digging for the other ones. Note that VLSI is currently backed by SoftBank. Well, in a roundabout way, they are. So this could very well be a situation where I'm not putting any effort into the company itself. I'm trying to get them to sue on my behalf so that I can recover damages and use that to bolster other efforts. So I think that Intel is going to get another shot at this, but I don't know that the outcome is going to be any different. Maybe it could just be that Intel's hoping to not have to pay quite so much money on this patent infringement case. We're going to have to follow this a little bit closely, because just like any other patent infringement case that you have to deal with in IT, there's a lot of shades of gray that you have to unpack before you get to the truth of the matter. All right, Stephen, this week Meta announced at the RISC-V summit that they're all in on this new chip architecture. They've been looking at integrating RISC-V into their lineup for at least the last 4 years, and all of their efforts seem to be going well according to the interviews that I've seen. Now, you're probably wondering, does this mean that they're going to ditch all of their CPUs for these ARM-based processors or RISC-based processors? And the answer is no, because they're using them in very specific applications like video transcoders, inference accelerators, and AI training systems. The goal is to move any workload that needs to be accelerated onto a RISC-V based system so that the CPUs aren't being eaten up by all of these, specific workloads. Stephen, why would Meta be ignoring the current state where everyone's using GPUs for everything, not to mention x86 and ARM, and jumping right into RISC-V?
I think the answer is because it works. I'm very excited about what RISC-V is, what the potential of RISC-V is, but of course, the proof is in the pudding, and this is some of the best pudding announcements I've seen in a long time. So just to reiterate here, at the RISC-V Summit, Meta announced that they have built a scalable video processor, MSVP, built on the RISC-V instruction set, but with custom instructions that they have added to allow much more high-performance transcoding of video. And in fact, not only is this in production, it is handling every single video that's being uploaded to Facebook, Messenger, and Instagram as we speak. They've also announced that this optimized processor replaced 85% of the CPUs that were formerly doing that. So in other words, they're now down to a footprint only 15% of the size of the previous one. This seems credible to me simply because it is an optimized processor to do a specific task, the specific task being transcoding video into Meta's preferred format. That is the ideal use case for something like RISC-V. You have a hyperscaler with lots of resources and lots of needs, very predictable data, and of course they can make an accelerator that does just this one thing, and it does it very, very well. I think that what we're going to see increasingly is companies like Meta are going to be adopting custom processors to do things like this, high volume tasks that can be accelerated in silicon. And they're going to be using RISC-V to do that because ARM doesn't let companies, unless they have the very special super elite diamond status license, ARM doesn't let them change the inner functions of the chip. RISC-V you can, and Meta was able to put together their own special chip, and it works great. I also think that this is a huge vote of confidence for the RISC-V architecture overall, and I think that we're going to see a lot more coming out of this. In fact, I would not be at all surprised if there are future announcements from companies like Meta that they're going to be, for example, accelerating AI workloads with special custom instruction sets on RISC-V. That would be another great low-hanging fruit. Certainly more and more transcoding processors are going to be using this thing. And frankly, I wouldn't be surprised at all if we find out in the future that certain serverless applications are running on specialized RISC-V servers in the cloud. That would make a lot of sense. If you're interested in this topic, I actually recorded at AWS reInvent a Gestalt IT Tech Talk with a friend of the show, Daniel Newman from the 6.5, and we're going to be publishing that shortly, so you'll be able to hear the thoughts of me and of Daniel on the evolution of the data center and the cloud from CPU and GPU and x86 to ARM and potentially to RISC-V. Aviz Networks announced this week that they've just closed a new funding round of $10 million. The startup is focused on support for the open source SONiC networking operating system, and it was led by Cisco Investments. Aviz has products focused on installation of SONiC as well as practical uses such as packet brokering and fabric testing. Tom, we have been watching SONiC very closely, and there's a bunch of startups in this space, but you've just recently talked to Aviz. How will this funding round help them, and is there something to this Cisco connection?
I always think this is funny because a lot of people are like, oh, Cisco's looking at buying this company, because they've invested in them. No, Cisco actually does run an investment arm. It's not always the case that Cisco buys a company that they invest in. But you have to wonder if Cisco doesn't think that there's something here. Because you're right, we have seen a dearth of startups recently that are focused on this idea of bringing SONiC to the enterprise. We're not really in a situation where people are developing their own operating system now to do that. I mean, we do have companies that are building their own operating systems, but the fact that there are several startups who have kind of landed on SONiC to do that tells you that somebody believes there's value there. The problem is that SONiC is not the easiest thing in the world to move into the enterprise. It really was built for hyperscalers and service providers, and its instrumentation and its setup and everything like that feels very focused on that world. It's almost like you need a company who's focused on figuring out how to package it properly and provide installation support services for the common person to be able to run it in an environment that feels good. And if you're having shades of Red Hat right now, you would not be the only one thinking that, because in the interview where they announced that they're getting this funding round, their CEO, Vishal, actually said the same thing. He's like, we see ourselves as kind of the Red Hat of the SONiC world, which is really what they are. They're providing installation and support services for this operating system. They're also upstreaming a lot of code back into SONiC so that people can take advantage of this. But of course, because their people wrote the code, they know how to use it better than anybody else. And I think that there's a real value here. Because kind of like we talked about in the previous story about using RISC-V architecture to kind of build what you want to build, you can do that with SONiC too. If you need to focus this switch on high-speed packet throughput and strip out a lot of the stuff that you don't really care about, great, you can do that in the operating system. If you need to interface with some of the chip makers' chips and make sure that they're running at high performance, you can. And one of the things that they are also really good at is finding bugs in those chips and working around them, but also getting back to the chip manufacturers to say, you've got a bug here and you really probably should fix it. So I think that there's a lot of upside to getting this investment, because just like we've seen in anywhere else, with a lot of money, these companies can continue to provide these support services. It will allow SONiC to continue to mature as an operating system in the enterprise and encourage more people to take a chance on installing it because they know there's support services out there to help them, and not just jumping on a forum somewhere and hoping that Denver Coder 7 has figured this thing out. Stephen, NetApp and AWS have unveiled a scale-out FSx for ONTAP file system during reInvent last week, and it's boasting a 9-fold increase in storage performance for Amazon FSx for NetApp ONTAP compared to existing systems. Scale-out file systems provide benefits such as multi-protocol data access, efficient snapshot copies, and replication for data protection, catering to organizations that are seeking to improve performance and scalability for their cloud workloads. With FSx for ONTAP already a leading storage solution for enterprises in AWS, what does this upgrade really mean for customers?
If you've been watching the rundown for a while, you know that I'm pretty bullish on NetApp's offerings in the cloud, especially for enterprise customers. Essentially, NetApp is really the leader in providing true enterprise-grade storage in the cloud, and they are supported and natively integrated into all three of the major clouds and more besides that. Now, the one that they use with AWS, the problem is that they all have different names, so it's a little confusing. But the one that they use in AWS is called FSx for ONTAP. And essentially what that is a native implementation of NetApp's famous ONTAP operating system running natively in AWS and integrated thoroughly with AWS. So this new update is actually pretty great. Essentially, they're scaling out ONTAP to allow greater performance. And this really works. According to what we're seeing here, they can achieve up to 36 gigabytes per second of throughput and 1.2 million SSD IOPS, which is a big upgrade over what we've seen in the past from FSx for NetApp ONTAP. This means that customers can get even better performance without sacrificing any of the enterprise features that they like from this system. Now, this isn't the only solution. We also talked about the performance, for example, of VAST data in AWS. And of course, there are lots of other things, including Amazon's native EBS and EFS, as well as lots of other offerings from companies. But this one's a good one, and I applaud NetApp for doing the right thing and continually upgrading this, and also for remaining true to what they're doing, which is basically bringing enterprise storage services into the cloud and not really getting distracted too much by a lot of the other solutions that are out there. So good on you, NetApp. I'm glad to see that things are moving forward. Tom, Broadcom may have only just closed the acquisition of VMware, but changes are already in the air. First, the company has actually relocated its headquarters from the former Santa Clara building that they had used for a long time to the schwanky VMware offices over in Palo Alto on Sand Hill Road. In addition, a new email sent out with lots and lots of noise coming out of it, where Broadcom CEO Hock Tan was pretty upfront and ordering VMware employees to return to office. Now, VMware has always been a pretty flexible workplace, allowing people to work from wherever, whenever, and that's all changing under Broadcom. Without talking too much about some of the other aspects of this, including layoffs and pushing out employees, let's talk a little bit about this return to office trend. The direct quote from Hock Tan was, if you live within 50 miles of an office, get your butt in here. Now, I've heard actually 60 miles as well, and I heard some other flowery language in terms of getting employees back to the office. Tom, what does this mean for Broadcom and VMware employees, but also in terms of the overall trend in Silicon Valley and besides of having employees return to work?
Means it's a good day to be in office furniture because you're about to make a mint. That feels a little bit, cliched, but when you think about this, anyone who's been to Silicon Valley in the last year has seen a lot of buildings being refurbished, has seen a lot of for rent signs going up, because we know that there is a trend that hybrid workforces are here to stay. Like, I literally saw an article yesterday that hybrid work is not going away anytime soon. And right below that was this article from the Fortune saying, Hock Tan says get your butt back in the office. You have to look at it from the perspective of a company like Broadcom, who has a massive amount of assets that they consider in their holding to be real estate. I mean, yeah, it is a swanky office over there at VMware. We've been there a number of times as part of our field day presentations. If you own that, why aren't you using it? Like, I know that there's a certain amount of cost that has to go into keeping the lights on and making sure your employees are taken care of and all that other stuff, but it's not like you can sell the building. I mean, you could, but it doesn't make a whole lot of sense, and you're definitely not going to get what you think it should be worth. And likewise, you've got a lot of pressure from inside of companies now, not just VMware or Broadcom, but a lot of companies saying, I need you here. I need you to be available to work with the team. I need you inside the corporate firewall to protect assets and all kinds of stuff. And there's a lot of tension there. And that tension can lead to disgruntled employees who are grousing because they don't want to come into the office 2 days a week, 3 days a week, or 5 days a week. So what happens? Do people decide to just grin and bear it because they actually like the job and they want to keep doing it even if it means they have to get up and go to work every morning? Or do they quit? Because remember, if you quit, the company has achieved a reduction in force without doing layoffs. You know that L word that the stock market really hates? Well, sometimes they really hate it. And I think that that's a key message here. By making companies have these return to office mandates, they are effectively saying we are getting rid of employees who don't want to be a part of our culture. And I know that sounds cold, but I also went to business school and I know how that feels. If you can reduce the number of people in your workforce without doing a direct layoff, it's actually advantageous for you because it means that the people that are still there have an attachment to the company. They want to be there. They're choosing to be there. And so if you need to come back later and look at their performance and things like that, it's a different kind of conversation to have than just, let's see if, like, remember the old stack ranking things. Let's just get rid of the bottom 10% no matter what. This is going to give them a little bit of breathing room. And all companies are going to be looking at this. This is not the first time that I've had a friend who's texted me saying, well, I guess I'm going to have to look for a new job because I just got a return to office mandate. I understand that the last 4 years, almost 5 years now, have been a little weird for people. It's been this idea, oh, well, I can just work from home or I can continue to do the same job and I don't need a manager and all these other things. But we've also seen that there are some things that really do require you to be in the office. There's still some things that people need to have access to. And I think that the blanket statements of, return to office is not going to fix any of these problems, or hybrid work is here to stay, or all of these things are still needing to be sorted out. Because I don't think you're going to see a run on the real estate market. I don't think that the office furniture companies are going to be making gangbusters business anytime soon. I think that there's still some fine-tuning of these knobs to figure out how best to accomplish the dual goals of having increased employee productivity, but also fostering an office environment where, conversations happen and teams build and those kinds of things. So I'm hoping that we see good news coming out of this down the road and not a culture shift inside of VMware. Because like you said, they've always been a flexible work environment. But as we learned a couple of weeks ago, cultures can shift as companies are acquired, as assets get moved around. So we'll just have to see what happens. All right, Stephen, there was one thing we wanted to take a closer look at this week, and it has to do with AI. Because IBM and Facebook's parent company Meta have decided that they're going to advocate for a more open approach to AI. They've announced the Joint AI Alliance Group. Companies are a part of a growing trend that see AI should not be about proprietary closed models and protocols. Some of the other companies that have signed on to this include people that you probably recognize, like Dell, Sony, AMD, Intel, lots of other little AI startups. Now, they probably seem like they're diametrically opposed to the other names in AI that you probably are familiar with, like OpenAI, Google, and Microsoft, who are focused on creating AI rules that may favor outcomes which are more favorable to their company, which is one of the things that the AI Alliance Group is alleging. We're going to see a lot of competition between them and other companies that are really big in the space, like NVIDIA and, OpenAI, Microsoft, Google, you name it. So I'm kind of curious to get your take on this, Stephen, because we've always talked about different aspects to AI than what you might see in the news. And having this call for openness in AI, do you think it's going to force a harder conversation for these people? Or is it just going to set up battle lines for another protracted argument?
Well, I think there's multiple ways that we could see this story. Certainly, one of the ways that we could look at it is cynically. And Tom, I trust you to look at this story with the most cynical possible lens. And the cynical take on this is, really, Meta and IBM are going to lead a charge for openness and transparency and fairness and social progress in AI. Meta and IBM. Okay, so we could take that approach. We could also look at this from sort of a cynical market lens and say, okay, let's see, who are these companies? Let's see, these are the companies that are maybe trailing a little bit. We've talked before about how Microsoft and OpenAI and NVIDIA, are just eating everyone's lunch in this space, and everyone else is playing catch up. And basically, most of the companies playing catch up are throwing their weight behind the OpenAI alliance. So we could look at it that way as sort of a clash of titans, or we could look at it on the face of it. So I want to start on the face of it. what are they saying the OpenAI Alliance is for? And then we can maybe get a little bit cynical and snarky because, hey, this is the Gestalt IT rundown after all. So let's look at it. So first off, what is the AI Alliance? So the idea is that this would be an organization that would focus on accelerating open AI technology and transparency, that would advocate for things like safety and security, for responsible use of AI, that they would bring together all sorts of companies that are building this stuff. They would build things together in an open way. Now, I assume that kind of means open source and open source models, open source tools. We'll see. It seems like that's the direction that they would head. That they would enable people and train people and build up an alternative open ecosystem. And most importantly, that they would advocate. So this OpenAI Alliance would be present in the debate in national capitals and politics, in the world of public opinion, in the news. Basically, they would be out there saying, hey, hang on. I know that people are worried about AI, but if we as a society, as a world, get together and we figure out ways of dealing with AI technology, that we can approach this in a more responsible way, that we can have better policy, better regulations, and of course, ultimately, better AI tools than what is being developed sort of in secret by these major Silicon Valley firms. So that's the positive way to look at this. I wonder, Tom, do you have any snark to share?
Oh, I always have snark to share, but I think in this particular case, it speaks to the point that you raised, that when you look at the group of people who's behind this, they are not the names that you think of when you immediately think of AI research. And how do you prevent someone from gaining an insurmountable lead? Well, you can either run faster than they can, or you can argue with the ref that they need to slow down. And I think that that's what's happening here. Because you'll note that they have created an alliance that is designed to argue that everything should be open and freely shareable, and we can all build on the same stuff so that nobody gets the same lead. If you are a fan of car racing, you know what this feels like. Because everybody uses the same engine, because everybody has the same restrictions. The only thing that's different is the stickers on the outside of your car. Because nobody is allowed to go faster than a certain limit, and if they do, they find ways to make it all fair. So that means that it's down to the skill of the driver, right? Or in this case, the skill of the developers. But I don't think that this is actually going to fix their problem, because the looming thing in the back that nobody has realized is that in order to ensure that everything is open and safe and secure, do you know what that means? Regulation. Because the unstated goal was, we want this to be open and free and fair for us to use because we want to make extra money. Sorry, did I say the quiet part out loud? Can you trust a corporation to regulate itself? On the face of it, no. Because a corporation's job is not to make the world a better place. The corporation's job is to make money. And they're going to do that for their shareholders. So if you want a company to do the right thing, you basically have to create an environment where they are not able to do anything but the right thing, on top of making a little bit of money on the side. That means government regulation. And I think that that's where this will eventually evolve to, is that the only way to ensure that this is the case is to have some kind of a government entity, whether it's the EU or the US or whomever, step in and say, we are going to create guidelines, guardrails for AI to ensure that it has the best interests of humans at heart, not humans that have invested in your company. And so I worry that you've effectively unleashed a sleeping giant, to quote the oft-used idiom, of the government is just one step away from coming into this and saying, well, we like your ideas, but we're going to take it one step further. And then nobody's going to be happy, which honestly could be the most equitable situation. But Stephen, do you have a different negative outtake on this?
Well, I think that I'm going to get negative here a little bit on some of the press surrounding this. Now, what I've heard, the initial reactions that I've heard from this has been a lot of really, Meta and IBM, really? And then a lot of, okay, I see. So you can't compete with CUDA, you can't compete with OpenAI, so you're going to throw your weight behind anything that gives you an advantage. I could see that. But here's the thing. Ultimately, what will come out of this is basically what comes out of it. I mean, I don't want to get too, namby-pamby about it, but, this could actually be a good thing. Some of the other people involved in this are people that I respect in the industry. Some people, for example, that created MLPerf and Hugging Face and Llama and Stable Diffusion and some of these other tools. Well, they're part of this thing too. So it's not just PyTorch versus CUDA, Meta versus AWS, versus Microsoft versus Google. This is a lot of different people, a lot of different and real people who really care trying to do things. Now, is that going to make any difference? I'm not sure. But as you point out, Tom, I think that the sword of Damocles is hanging over AI no matter what. Everywhere you look, in public opinion, not tech opinion, in public opinion of AI is negative, negative, negative. The daily or the last week tonight just did a thing where they showed all sorts of people in the news comparing AI to the Terminator, because that's the metaphor that everyone uses when they think about AI. It's going to come and kill us. It's Skynet. It's going to murder us in our sleep. That's the kind of attitude that the world has. And if you look at what governments are doing, they're reacting to that very, very strongly. Now, I personally feel that the Biden administration's executive order was actually quite nuanced and quite positive. But that being said, it's still pretty isolated from the people who are actually building the tools, building the solutions, using these solutions. I think that the AI Alliance could actually help to connect some of those people who are building this stuff with the government in a positive way. Now, why is it being created? Well, it's obviously being created for commercial reasons. But it's also created because, frankly, if that sword falls, you should probably think about what that means for the industry. We've got governments in Europe and in North America that are very concerned about AI. We've got governments in the Middle East and that are much less concerned about AI and pushing development forward. And we've got a very strange political dynamic here. Now, what we need to do, and I mean all of these people all around the world, is we need to get together and we need to figure out how to deal with this new technology that we've created. Frankly, it reminds me of when I was back in college and I was studying pugwash and things like that, and the reactions to the creation of the atomic bomb. Essentially, we humans have created a technology that has huge potential but also huge risks, and we humans need to get together and deal with this technology. If the AI Alliance pushes that forward, despite the commercial stuff and all this that's going on, fine, I'll take it. I just think that we as an industry need to get together and we need to be answering these questions. And one more thing, let's address the word open. One of the challenges with what's going on right now, if you look at OpenAI, which ironically has the word open in their name too, you look at what they're doing with their GPT models, you look at what Microsoft is doing, you look at CUDA and NVIDIA, these are very much, let's say contained solutions, controlled solutions. I think that the AI world is on the cusp of open alternatives that run anywhere on anything that do much of the same things, and that is going to really crack open Pandora's box. Because it's one thing if ChatGPT can pass the Turing test. It's quite a different thing if the model that runs on your laptop or your phone can pass the Turing test. And that's what's happening next.
Yeah, I would agree. And I would add on that one of the things that people need to understand is, in order for this to work, we all have to agree on what the standards are going to be. And we all have to decide what kind of social mores we're going to impart to AI. Because, like it or not, AI is not magical, mystical intelligence that has been developed from the ether. It's an amplification of who we are as a people. And all it takes is one person deciding that, or one group of people deciding that they don't like the restrictions and they're just going to let the leash off. And then it becomes a problem. Anyone who's ever studied, zero-sum games and the prisoner's dilemma know that everybody has to be all in for this to be advantageous. As soon as someone decides to cut and run, you've got a problem. And I think that opening things up is going to help, because rather than using the word open, I wish they would say it for what it really is: transparent. Everybody has visibility into what's going on. Everybody plays by the same rule set. I referenced racing earlier, and it actually is a really good way to think about it. Everybody has to start from the same base. And you know what your restrictions are, and you know what your areas for improvement could be. But you can't improve very much. So it ultimately comes down to how can you iterate on the systems that you have to make it work better. I mean, we've seen, you and I are huge sci-fi fans, and we've seen that for years. Go all the way back to Asimov, the 3 rules. You have to make the best robot you can that still adheres to the 3 rules, the 3 laws of robotics, right? That, to me, is where we're getting to in AI, is that we're all going to have to make this decision, and we're all going to have to agree that we're going to follow those rules, because if we don't know what's going to happen. And no open advocacy group is going to fix that. No closed source group is going to be able to repair that damage. And it has massive possibility for impact on the human race. All right, Stephen, we've talked a lot about that, and we know that there's a lot of technology out there that people are very curious about. Thankfully, we've already posted our 2024 schedule to techfieldday.com, and we wanted to highlight a few events that we've got coming up that we definitely want to make sure you know about. And Stephen's going to be the one kicking us off with the first event in 2024.
Yep, we're coming back with another Cloud Field Day event. Very excited about this one. The delegate list looks awesome. It's going to be January 31st, February 1st in Silicon Valley. Wait till you hear what we've got in store for you. And if you're excited about joining that, do reach out. Then, Tom, I think you're going overseas.
Yeah, the very next week, I'm jumping on an airplane and I'm headed to Amsterdam, the land of stroopwafels and bikes, and Cisco Live, because we're going to be at Cisco Live in Maya. We're going to be doing some great presentations with Cisco. They've got some exciting announcements that they're going to want to unveil for you. I've already been putting together the list of people who are going to be involved in that. If you want to head over to techfieldday.com, you can check out that lineup of delegates. And we're going to have a couple of more presenting companies as well, because we know how much you love seeing the companies that partner with Cisco and are a part of that ecosystem. And we'll have some great conversations with them as well. Then, Stephen, you've got another event coming in February.
Absolutely. I'm excited to announce that AI Field Day is returning. We have some major heavyweight support behind this one from the industry. And February 21st and 22nd, we're going to be back in Silicon Valley with another AI-focused field day. And again, it's all about implementing AI with practical tools and technologies.
Yes, and the next week we're going to be back with more networking field day action. We've got a wonderful lineup of delegates. We've got some great companies that are just ready to commit. We'll be adding them to the website as soon as we get all of their particular information. We're going to be taking place 28th and 29th of February. That's right. We are going to be having a field day event on Leap Day. It's so rare, it's amazing. Just like the people who are presenting at this event and the delegates who are attending, make sure you stay tuned for more information. And if you're someone who wants to be a field day delegate, make sure you fill out the form on our website, because we'd love to see that. We'd also love to see you back here next week, every Wednesday, 12:30 Eastern Time, for our episodes of The Rundown. You know where to find us. YouTube, website, just search for Rundown in your favorite podcast application if you want to listen to us at on your walk or while you're on the treadmill, because it's getting kind of cold outside. But we love to hear your feedback on the Rundown. We love hearing that people use us as their primary source of news, because let's face it, we're basically like snarky Edward R. Murrow and Walter Cronkite. And if you're old enough to get those references, take some Advil, because your back's probably hurting right now. We'll be back next week with more great conversations, with more wonderful news stories, and we hope to see you then.